Part 2 of our NFC North opponent preview is brought to you by SeatGeek. Let SeatGeek take the confusion out of your ticket buying experience. Instead of shopping dozens of sites to find the best deal, let SeatGeek do the work for you. Their app scans the web for all the best deals to your favorite games, concerts, shows, what have you, and rates them on a scale of 0 to 10 to let you know if you're getting the best bang for your buck. I've been having some trouble with that sentence lately. A green dot marks great deals, a yellow dot good deals, and a red dot not so good. Use promo code ACAA at checkout to receive $20 off your first purchase. That's 2 free beers at the stadium. I don't know why you'd pay $10 for a beer, but if you do, the first two are on SeatGeek. So what are you waiting for? That's promo code ACAA for $20 off your first purchase. At SeatGeek, life's an event. We have the tickets. Part 2 of the NFC North preview is also brought to you by MyBookie. It's hard to believe, but football is almost back. That means it's time to make an account at the best online sports book known to man. That's right, I'm talking about MyBookie. With an easy, no-hassle mobile site, 24/7 customer service, and bets on every sport and prop imaginable, MyBookie provides a fun, safe betting experience. And if you deposit today, MyBookie will give you a 50% deposit bonus. That's right. You put in 100, they'll give you 50. You put in 1,000, they give you 500. It's just that easy. Football season is still a few weeks away, but it's never too soon to get your account set up. So head on over to mybookie.ag and sign up today with promo code BEARS100. That's promo code BEARS100. At MyBookie, you play, you win, you get paid. Part 2 of our NFC North preview brings forth the Green Bay Packers. So my guest, as always, when it comes to anything Green Bay, Evan Western from SB Nation's Acme Packing Company. And just like I said before Jeremy's episode, despite his allegiance, and especially with this guy, he's a Packer fan, for Christ's sake. Despite his allegiances, I am a big fan of the guy, and I do enjoy talking to him. So sit back, relax, and enjoy talking about the 2019 Green Bay Packers with our good friend from Acme Packing Company, Evan Western. Part 2 of our NFC North preview, talking about the Green Bay Packers. We're halfway done after this one, and we got the Vikings, then our beloved Chicago Bears, and then we move on and get ready for the preseason, for training camp, and then, of course, the 2019 regular season. What's going on, everybody? Larry D back for Part 2 of our NFC North opponent preview, featuring the Green Bay Packers this time around, our most hated rival, and the team up first for our beloved Chicago Bears. Week 1, 2019, kicking off the entire season with the kickoff game on Thursday Night Football, September the 5th. Can't wait for that one. It's like literally, like today is July the 5th, so 2 months from today. 2 months from today, we're kicking it off with Green Bay at the Soldier Field, and I cannot wait. I'm absolutely jacked, in case you couldn't tell. But before we get to our interview with Evan, I did want to share something. I failed to do it last weekend on the actual anniversary of it when we released the Cowboys show, but a little bit of an off-the-subject thing for you guys. Don't really have any news or notes to bring forth to you. I'm actually recording this before the holiday, so I'm releasing it on Friday. So by the time you hear this on the 5th, it'll be 2 months until the game goes. But so last Friday was June the 28th, and June the 28th of this year, obviously 2019, was the 23rd anniversary of the day that my favorite band of all time, Kiss, launched their long-awaited reunion tour, when Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley reunited with original members Ace Frehley and Peter Criss, kicked off their reunion show, their reunion tour in Detroit, Michigan, at Tiger Stadium in front of somewhere between 45 and 50,000 fans. The show was, it had its glitches. I've actually seen it. They released it as part of one of their DVD box sets a few years back. And, you could kind of see there was some first night mistakes in there. Somebody missed this, somebody missed that, and whatnot. But by the time I got to see them about 3 weeks later, on July the 16th, and I still have my ticket. July 16th was actually the second night in Chicago. I remember very vividly my dad and I went to go and stand in line at Ticketmaster when that was still a thing. And I mean standing in line. Ticketmaster obviously still exists, but standing in line for tickets. I think the Ticketmaster was at the J.C. Penney or something like that. My dad and I are standing in a line that's about 3 miles long, and about 5 minutes into tickets going on sale, somebody from inside comes out and says the show is sold out. So everyone is obviously dejected. There are a lot of people who have either A, not seen Kiss in a really long time, or have seen Kiss during their non-makeup era, or never seen Kiss at all. Dejected. My father included, who was around in the 70s when they were basically the Backstreet Boys of rock and roll, and they were absolutely everywhere, lunch pails and, stuff like that. They had a movie of the week on TV, Kiss Meets the Phantom, back in 1978, and everything. And he hadn't, he'd been taking me to Kiss shows since 88, but every Kiss show that I had ever seen was the non-makeup era with Gene and Paul, and then Bruce Kulick and Eric Singer at the Revenge Tour, and then the previous shows were Eric Carr before he passed away. So this was going to be my first chance to see Kiss as God intended, with the makeup, with the costumes, the lights, the bombs, the whole 9 yards. And the guy comes out and says the show is sold out. But, he says, after everyone gets done cursing at him, but they've added a second show, so those tickets are going on sale now. And I'll never forget this show. It was epic beyond anything that I had ever, that I could have ever hoped for, really. I mean, I'm just getting flashbacks just thinking about it. It was my dad and I that were there, plus some drunken dickhead that he got tickets for from work. I don't remember who this guy was. I don't remember his name to this day. All I know was that my dad had to separate me from him because A, he wouldn't leave me alone, and then B, to top things off, he spilled beer on my shoulder, and I damn near punched him out right there before the concert started. So my dad actually had to, my dad was sitting on my right side. My dad pulled me to his right so that I could sit in his seat. He sat in mine to put some distance between me and this guy before I punched him out in the middle of this arena. I was only 18 at the time, just full of piss and vinegar, and this dickhead just dripped beer on my shoulder. On my brand new T-shirt, man, I had bought a shirt for my university, the one that I was going to in about a month's time, and this guy spilled beer on it before the show even started. So anyway, once I finally calmed down, the house lights went black, the lights and everything, the huge Kiss curtain drops down with the Kiss logo on the front. The intro, the famous intro, you wanted the best, you got the best, the hottest band in the world, Kiss. Boom, the intro to Deuce comes on, and there's a big explosion, the curtain drops, the lights go up, and there they are. There they are. It was Kiss. It was Kiss, man. It was Kiss. It was all of them. Ace and Peter, along with Paul and Gene in their costumes. They were tailored after the Love Gun 1977-78 costumes. I'm throwing a lot of information at you guys. I hope you can keep up. There will be a quiz afterwards. And here's the thing. When I saw them for the first time, as I said before, as God intended, I got to admit, I cried. I absolutely cried. I could not believe it. All that time, I would see like those videos in the late 80s and early 90s, those concert videos, Michael Jackson, seeing people crying, passing out, having to be, carried away from the arena and everything, never made any sense to me until that moment. It never made any sense to me because I had seen Kiss before, at least 3 or 4 times before this time. But like I said, there were non-makeup shows. It wasn't the same. The music was still great, but it wasn't Kiss. You know what I mean? And as soon as they were standing there, the first person my eyes got pulled to was, of course, Gene Simmons, who's, you may not know Kiss or their music, but you know that face when you see it. And there it was, standing right there in front of me. He's actually, the demon himself is here. I started freaking out. And, before I even knew it, I have tears streaming down my face. I'm crying. That's how awesome I thought that was. And I sang every song at the top of my lungs. My ears were ringing after the show. And it was amazing. It was the first of, I believe, 13 or 14 in makeup that I've seen since then. I saw them once on the reunion tour that night. I saw them again, Psycho Circus, 2 years later in 98. I saw them once on the farewell tour, the first one, in 2000. And I saw them again a few years later when they came back and toured with Aerosmith in 2003. I saw them twice on that tour, and then again in 2004. You guys get the idea. And just now on their farewell tour, the actual farewell tour, the retirement tour, if you will, I've seen them twice so far. In March of this year, I saw them once on March 2nd, again on March the 10th. Both were amazing, fantastic shows, despite the fact that Gene turned 70 in August. Paul is kicking the hell out of 60. He's in the later half of that decade, so the guys are getting old, but they still do it better than anybody, in my opinion. So, like I said, I didn't have any news or notes that I had to share with you guys, so I just wanted to go ahead and throw in that little nugget. Had all kinds of fun memories swirling around in my head, thinking about the anniversary of that show and then going to see them for the first time on that tour. I mean, I'd seen them in home videos and all that kind of stuff, but nothing beats the real thing right there in front of you. And with, the whole show, everything that I'd ever wanted to see, Gene Simmons flying to the top of the arena, Ace Frehley doing his solo and shooting rockets and the smoking guitar and, everything else. It was amazing, absolutely amazing. And for nostalgia's sake, it's probably my favorite Kiss show of them all, although the ones that I just saw in March were pretty kick-ass too. But that one I think was the most special, the first one with the original members and everything. I got to see the originals together 3 times, I think, all together before it was done. So, just an amazing, amazing memory. My only regret about that show was that it is literally the only show that I've been to that I didn't come away with a program. Because I've always been a big guy, always a little too big for the T-shirts they were selling, so I wasn't going to spend $35 or $40 on a shirt that would just sit in my closet and never be able to fit into it. So I always got programs, and I didn't get one for the reunion tour. So I got one for Psycho Circus, the farewell tour in 2000, and everyone that's followed since then. And but I didn't get one for the reunion tour. I've always regretted that. So. But otherwise, fantastic memories. Hanging out with my dad, almost got into a fist fight in the show before it got started, but it was a good time. And so, like I said, seeing that the 28th was the anniversary of the tour kicking off, that brought back the memories of the first time I saw Kiss, as I like to say, as God intended, with makeup and costumes and the bombs and the explosions, the lights, and all their little stunts and everything that they did. It was amazing. So, anyway. Now that I've bored you to death listening to that, let's go ahead and get into this preview for the Green Bay Packers, part number 2 of our NFC North opponent preview with Evan Western from Acme Packing Company. Part 2 of our NFC North preview takes us to the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field, home of the Green Bay Packers. And here to help us preview these 2019 Packers, despite his allegiances, our good friend, Evan Western from Acme Packing Company. Evan, how we doing, man?
Doing great. Looking forward to hopefully a turnaround season this year. It was a little rough last year, man.
I bet.
After week 1, it was all down. Yeah, it was all downhill from there.
Oh, you had to throw that in there, didn't you?
Of course.
After week 1, the glory of week 1, it was kind of downhill from there. But I was going to ask you, for starters, welcome to our world, where the off season sucks and the season wasn't much better, and new coaches coming in and the prospect of it not working out and all that kind of stuff. Even though the last few coaching changes have worked out pretty well for you guys, maybe this one won't. Fingers crossed. But anyway, so let's talk real quick about 2018. Obviously, we had a bananas week 1 encounter where the Khalil Mack coming out party for the Bears for the first half. the resurgence of Aaron Rodgers and the mythology that was created by Chris Collinsworth and Al Michaels going crazy over just amplifying something. Like, what he was doing was great all on its own, and they just had to make it 1,000 times bigger because of the knee injury. That drove me crazy. But from then on, as you said, it was not a cakewalk. You tie week 2 against Minnesota. You have later on, you have that tough loss against the Redskins, and it just did not get off to a good start, and it just seemed like the team was never really able to recover.
Yeah, and I think you can look back at that injury that Rodgers had in that first game, and that obviously was a big factor throughout the season because he relies so much on his mobility. He has for years, and even more so in recent years when it seemed like he stopped playing within the Mike McCarthy system, or rather when the Mike McCarthy system stopped working and he started playing more backyard ball. Right? I mean, he's become the master of the broken play. And when he's hobbling around on one bad leg, that obviously is kind of saps that particular just innate ability and skill that he has a little bit. So that was part of it. And I think you really finally saw the breakdown of McCarthy's scheme in its totality. The team just doesn't have the horses that it did in 2011 at the receiving position when they had that just insane group of receivers. And yeah, at that point he could go, throw out 4 or 5 wide and call a bunch of ISO routes, and they'd beat their guys one-on-one, and Rodgers would have guys to throw to wide open in rhythm, and it was great. And when you have one guy in Devontae Adams who can reliably do that play after play after play, it just doesn't really work.
Right.
So I think that kind of gets to the core of what the problems were on offense. And that kind of led to this downward spiral that really we've seen for the last couple of years in the Packers offense.
So let's talk about McCarthy and the issues there, because there was an article that came out. I'm sure you read it. I don't know if it was The Athletic or whatever it was that put out that article that basically detailed how the relationship not only was it not working last year, but had been breaking down for several years and everything, and how McCarthy was increasingly frustrated by the fact that Rodgers basically changed every play that came into the huddle and what have you, and kind of led to the worries about whether or not the Matt LaFleur thing is going to work out because he's so used to doing his own thing with McCarthy there.
Yeah, it's. I tend to think that the LaFleur stuff is a little overblown and is a little bit presumptuous at this point.
Sure.
Right? I mean, you had. Let's look back about 15 years ago when a young kind of hotshot coach came in and was tasked with revitalizing Brett Favre's career.
Right.
Mike McCarthy got through to Brett Favre, which a lot of people didn't think that Brett Favre would ever be able to change around. But that 2007 season, he had a great year and took the Packers to the NFC Championship. So I think where it comes down to for Rodgers, to me, is that I suspect that he wasn't being challenged mentally, and that's something that I think he craves. He always wants to be kind of pushing himself. I mean, he's a really intelligent guy, right? And that's always something that I think he has always craved, and this gives him an opportunity to really dive into a new playbook and learn a new scheme. And the audible thing and the changing of the plays, I think what they need to find, and I think what they probably will find, is some sort of happy medium, right? You're not going to have the freedom that Rodgers had to change the play if it gets called into the huddle and he doesn't like it. But basically, every time that LaFleur calls a play in, you're going to get multiple play calls, and Rodgers can pick from those what makes the most sense to him. Right. And he'll have a little bit of flexibility at the line of scrimmage if he sees something. That I think will still be there. But I think for the most part, it to me comes down to the fact that McCarthy's offense just didn't work anymore.
No.
And Rodgers is a smart guy, and he realized that. And I think that more than anything was the reason why he was changing so many of these plays, was he was recognizing, look, this isn't going to work with the personnel that we have and the matchups that we have. And so I think that's why he was changing the play. You didn't see him doing that all the time, at least as far as we know, back in 2011 and 2013 and 2014 when he was winning MVP awards.
Right.
And it all kind of broke down in 2015 when Jordy Nelson tore his ACL, and the Packers really had no consistent veteran receivers on that team. And since then, it's been a struggle to get this passing game back to where it was before that. And I'm hoping that a new system, a new version of the West Coast offense coming from that Kyle Shanahan tree is hopefully that's just what the doctor ordered for Rodgers and company.
So let's talk about this new head coach of yours. Were you happy with the hire, or were you like me initially when they announced like the 5 or 6 candidates that the Bears interviewed for the head coaching job? Of course, Matt Nagy was at the bottom of the list as far as like this is the guys that I want and everything. Where did LaFluer rank on the list of guys that they were talking to, and were you initially happy with the hire?
Yeah, I think everybody kind of had their bets hedged on Josh McDaniels being the guy. That I think that is certainly where I was leaning towards where they were going to go. And I think that if you had a McDaniels-Aaron Rodgers pairing, I think that those two could have worked if they kind of turned full heel together, right? And basically said, F you to the rest of the NFL. We're going to go on a scorched earth tour and just destroy everything in our way.
Sure.
I think that could have worked if they did it right. I think there's a much better chance of LaFleur and Rodgers clicking than I think the explosive potential is probably a little lower, both explosive in a good way and explosive in a bad way with LaFleur than it would have been with McDaniels. But really, the rest of the candidates didn't jump out to me. I remember Jim Caldwell was in the mix. Ooh. They interviewed Joe Philbin, the interim coach at the end of the year. I don't think anyone was really particularly excited about him. There weren't a whole lot of names really outside of McDaniels that made you go, okay, this is the offensive mind that we think can bring Rodgers to a level where or back to that MVP level again. But I think the reaction once LaFleur was hired, the initial reaction was kind of, okay, we need to find out why he was the guy.
Yeah.
And especially after leading the Titans offense last year, which ended up finishing somewhere in the 20s, and it wasn't great, and after that being really his only year calling plays. But I think the more we dug into his background, kind of where he came from, again, yeah, he was in LA with Sean McVay, but really he comes more out of the Shanahan side of the West Coast tree than the McVay side. I think the similarities there with Shanahan are more prevalent. And when you look back into his background, I mean, he played quarterback. He was Matt Ryan's quarterback coach in Atlanta when he had that MVP year a couple years ago. I think this hire was always going to be about Rodgers and getting him back on track, and I think everybody knew that. And I think they've given the candidates who are out there the best chance to get someone who can get to Rodgers and develop a good partnership with him.
Right. So I mean, it's going to be an interesting pairing, because isn't Rodgers older than LaFleur?
Not quite. LaFleur is 39.
39, okay.
Rodgers is 35.
Right, okay. Yeah, so Rodgers has been in the league.
But it's
forever.
kind of a similar age gap, again, to McCarthy and Favre. Favre
Sure.
was 36. McCarthy, I want to say, was 41 when he got hired in 2006. So, I don't want to say we've been here before and we've done it and it's going to be fine, but it's not, it's something that we have seen before, so there's at least a possibility that this can work out.
Yeah, I was wondering how Packer fans felt about the LaFleur hire, because I didn't see much online or anything like that when the hire was made, and I just remember how I felt about when McCarthy got hired. He had a similar pedigree in the fact that his years calling plays for the 49ers were not impressive. Mm-hmm. I was like, this guy called, like, he was like 29th or something like that, and yep. Alex Smith really hasn't done much of anything in the time that he's been calling plays for Alex Smith and whatnot. I thought it was a joke that they hired him. Like, this is going to be a disaster, and I can't wait to see it. And how wrong I turned out to be with that one, at least for the first several years of McCarthy being in charge there. So we'll see how it works out. I I didn't have the same feeling about LaFluer because of the McVay coaching tree, if you will, and having spent time with him and knowing that maybe he wasn't the guy calling the plays, but he was at least had something to do with the game plans that seemed to work week in and week out for the Rams out there in 2017. So I guess I'm more inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt as opposed to just completely writing off McCarthy the way that I did when he got hired. So maybe it's a cautious thing that I'm doing because I just don't want to have to eat my words the way I did with McCarthy. That was ridiculous. I mean, yeah, I thought there's no way in hell. This is ridiculous. I'm so glad they made this hire, McCarthy. Are you kidding me right now? And then like, oh yeah, he's actually pretty awesome. He's got a street named after him and a Super Bowl ring, and yeah, shows what the hell I know. But so anyway, but we look into free agency, and you were talking a minute ago about the wide receiving core and everything. Looking at free agency, looking at the draft, no wide receivers brought in, and you lost Randall Cobb. So I mean, what's the plan here with the offense? Are we just hoping that, because I know you drafted a bunch of young guys last year, are we getting guys back from injury this season that we're excited about? Why no moves at wide receiver in the offseason?
Well, there's two things at play here. One, yes, we are getting a big player back from injury. That's Geronimo Allison. I think people around the NFL are really sleeping on how good he can be and how good he will be this year. I mean, he was really probably arguably the better Packers receiver in the first 4 games of the season before he got hurt. He had more receiving yards than even Devontae Adams had in those first 4 games. So you're looking at a guy who he'll probably honestly be the Packers' main slot receiver for at least the start of this season. But he was on almost, I think, an 80, 90 yards per game clip in the first part of the season before he got hurt. So look for him to be a real big part of this offense. And you mentioned the young guys, Marquez Valdes-Scantling in particular, beyond just being one of the best names in the NFL, he really showed up last year when the Packers needed somebody to step up. And he was a 5th-round pick last year, but he's a big guy. He's 6'4", 210 or so. Ran a 4.37 at the combine last year, and so he's got that great deep speed. He can really take the top off the defense, and with the offense going to a little more play action than McCarthy used in the last couple of years, I think that's going to free up some big opportunities for him to beat some safeties deep over the top. So there's pieces there. They might not be proven over the course of a long season. Obviously, besides Devontae Adams, who I think I told you last year coming into last season, I thought he was a top 5 receiver, and I think he did a pretty good job of backing me up on that one. But yeah, I mean, he's the number one. He'll still get 150, 160 targets in this season. But Valdes-Scantling is a guy to watch for sure, and Allison's return is going to be big. And then you've got depth guys too that are developing. Equinemius St. Brown, another one of the rookies last year, the Notre Dame guy, he had a real promising start to his career last year too. So watching these guys develop a little bit, hearing everything coming out of practice and everything this spring, I'm confident that they made the right calls at receiver, not overpaying for a Randall Cobb. I mean, basically you took the $5 million that they could have paid Cobb to keep him around and put that towards the defense, which, let's face it, that's where the Packers have needed the better improvements personnel-wise anyway. So I think it was partially just allocation of resources, partially getting Allison back from injury, and then counting on the rookies from last year to develop into year 2.
Yeah, so you talked about the improvements on the defensive side. Clay Matthews is gone. He's in L.A. and upset that somebody's already wearing 52. Jake Ryan, inside linebacker, headed off to Jacksonville. Bashaud Breeland, the corner, is in Kansas City now. And I didn't see anything going on with Nick Perry or Muhammad Wilkerson yet. So any chance that those guys come back?
No, Perry, I want to say he was having a little flirtation with Seattle, but I don't see any. There's no chance he's coming back. The Packers' outside linebacker room is full, and I'm sure we'll get to that pretty shortly. But and Wilkerson, he still had that bad broken ankle early last season, and so he probably can't pass a physical at this point, and he had some off the field issues. I want to say he had he was arrested at some point this offseason. I don't see him coming back either. They've made a little bit of additions on the defensive line as well. But yeah, I mean, those are some big names from this defense that, over the last several years that are gone, and complete turnover really outside of the 1 year wonder Kyler Fackrell at the outside linebacker position.
Right. So you got Zadarius Smith, the outside linebacker from Baltimore, Preston Smith, the outside linebacker from Washington, some guy named Adrian Amos, something like, I don't know. It's some guy. He's going to be back there making $9 million a season. And the one offensive move that I saw of note was Billy Turner, the guard from Denver, being added to the offensive line. Was that an issue for you guys? I've always thought like the offensive line. I mean, I know you've had your injury issues. I remember talking to you about that. Like you were worried about, our 5th and 6th tackles are going to be starting in this game against the Bears, and then you went ahead and kicked the crap out of us anyway. But I mean, has the offensive line been an issue that you have to keep going out and sign, or is Billy Turner going to be a depth guy for you?
Yeah, last year the right guard position was a nightmare. They had Jari Evans in there from New Orleans the year before, and he was a solid, steady veteran player. But they expected Justin McCray, who had a nice year as kind of a reserve all-around backup guy in 2017. They expected him to take a big step forward last year and grab that right guard starting job, and he just did not live up to those expectations. So going out and getting Turner, you got him slotting in immediately at right guard as the starter, but he's also athletic enough and big enough he could slide out to tackle. So in the event that Brian Bulaga misses a couple of games, which, let's face it, that's a pretty strong likelihood that he'll miss 2 to 4 games next season.
Right.
You've got probably Turner can slide out to right tackle, and then you can put in a spot starter like a McCray or like an Elton Jenkins, the rookie out of Mississippi State. One of those guys can slide in for a couple games on the interior. But yeah, that right guard position last year was just a mess. So having that locked down, that's gonna be real big for this team in this season for sure.
So now we move on to the draft, and the draft was going to be a big night for the Packers because thanks to last year's trade, you had 2 first-round picks to play with this year. You spent the first one on Rashawn Gary out of Michigan, and from what I understand, what I remember about draft night, this was not a popular pick.
You got that right. Yeah, it was. Packers fans fell into the trap of looking solely at the stat lines on Rashawn Gary, at least early on, and seeing that he had, I think, 8 sacks in 3 years or something like that at Michigan. But what we've learned since then, and as we started learning in the hours after the draft, is everything that goes along with Gary. I mean, he's an amazing athlete. That part of it is not up for debate. I mean, He had probably the best workout of anybody more than 270 pounds in the history of the combine. I mean, he runs sub 4.6. He jumps 12 feet broad jump or something like that. It's absurd. I mean, he ran like a wide receiver at 275 pounds.
Right.
So, if you can harness that athletic ability, obviously that's the key. But when we started learning more and more about his role at Michigan on that defense, you find out that basically he was lining up over the tackle or over the guard, and occasionally over the tight end. But he was always on the strong side, and he was there for one reason only, and that was to stop the run. And it was plug up that strong side and take up as many blockers as you can, and let the linebackers, let your Chase Winovich on the weak side, and let Devin Bush clean up everything behind you. And that's the reason why he didn't rack up a whole lot of sacks and big statistics. Now, he had a labrum injury in his shoulder, and that kind of contributed to that a little bit. But you talk to anybody on that Michigan coaching staff, one of my good Packers friends, Peter Bukowski, who contributes to us at Acme Packing Company, he actually had Michigan's defensive coordinator on his podcast a couple months back, and Don Brown, all he was saying was he was raving about Gary as a player, as a guy, off the field, on the field, and basically says, this guy can do anything. He didn't do it at Michigan because we didn't ask him to do it. We asked him to do something very specific. So I think that's where the the concerns were look, we drafted another guy who's already coming in injured, and he didn't have a whole lot of production in college. But when you dive deeper, I think the reasons are there. And the other nice thing about it is, with the two Smiths in free agency, he's not going to be asked to start right away. So you can work him in situationally, get him rushing the passer, and hopefully maximize his impact on the plays that he is on the field.
So are you guys going to be 3-4 or 4-3? You got a hybrid thing going on. What are we gonna see from Green Bay on defense?
Well, we're going to see a lot of 4-2-5 nickel, or 2-4-5, I should say. That's pretty much the base formation at this point under Mike Pettin, who did come back under under Matt LaFleur after the coaching changes as coordinator.
Right.
So you'll see a lot of Kenny Clark and Mike Daniels as the down linemen, and then your usual kind of 4 linebacker setup with a couple of edge guys and a couple of off-ball linebackers. But what you'll also probably see a lot of is Zadarius Smith and Rashawn Gary as one of those 2 down linemen, especially on passing situations. You'll probably even see 4 or 5 outside linebackers on the field at one time, and no true defensive linemen in third and long situations. So look for a lot of nickel snaps like the Packers have been using in recent years. But they're going to move Zadarius Smith. They're going to move Gary around a lot with their hands in the dirt, standing up. And what Pettin loves to do is disguise his pressures and be able to bring pressure from multiple different places on a given play. So you can't really key in on one specific spot or one player. And so the additions they've made this season, I think, really give Pettin the ability to do that better.
God, I love football, man. God. I mean,
Right?
you just think about, like I was watching the 30 for 30 yesterday on the 4 falls of Buffalo, and the way the K-gun was so innovative at the time. Could an offense like that succeed today, which is pretty much like the base offense for most NFL teams nowadays? I mean, it was so different in its time, the run and shoot that the Oilers ran and everything, which almost got Warren Moon killed in every game because there were no tight ends or fullbacks or anything. But, have fun trying to stop those guys and everything. And now that's pretty much every offense you see in the NFL. And then the defense had to get creative to match what was going on there. And the first time we ever saw, like the formation you just talked about, a 2-4-5, was against Buffalo in Super Bowl 25 when Belichick put 2 down linemen in there. You got Lawrence Taylor on one end, you got Carl Banks on the other end. Those are your other 2 linebackers, and then you got Carson and Reasons in the middle and everything. There's your 2-4-5 to combat the pass, as opposed to trying to stop the run and let Thurman Thomas go nuts and stop the K-gun at all costs. I just love how you can't do this. You don't see it in any other sport. There's only so many different ways you can play baseball. There's only so many different ways you can play basketball or hockey or anything. You never really hear about the innovations in offense or defense in any of those sports. You hear it all the time in the NFL. These guys have to work overtime to be able to put a scheme out on the field that nobody's seen before, try to come out with a creative way to get open, because the athletes are getting better and better every single year, and you got to figure out a way to be able to beat that. And listening to you talk about that and thinking about what Nagy did with the Bears last year and having a guy like Khalil Mack on my team, that's why I love watching the game, because it's always changing, it's always evolving. Baseball seems the same to me today that it did 30 years ago when I first started watching it. So that's why I'm so crazy about football. It's not like any other sport. I don't care what anybody says.
It's why football coaches get paid the most, right? I mean, they've got by far the most creativity, and they have to. It's so much of a chess match. It's every time that the offense or defensive trends kind of inch ahead, you have to respond to that, and it comes down to, like you said, it's scheme, it's personnel, it's getting the right guys in there to combat these trends. I love that strategic aspect of it too. I'm right there with you.
Yeah, I mean, 'cause just think about 12, 13 years ago when every special teams coordinator in the NFL had a headache called Devin Hester. What do we got to do to stop this guy, because he is dangerous every single time he touches the ball. And the key for a while there was just don't kick it to him. Kick it away. Kick it out of bounds. Let the offense try to figure it out. Do not give Hester any opportunity to return the ball, because if he does, he's a potential touchdown every time he touches the ball. And then there, you know, other guys coming out in football, guys, you know, going a little further back, but guys like Larry Johnson and Priest Holmes and, you know, so on and so forth. There's always that one athlete that automatically changes the game, and then we got to start thinking about, A, we got to find more guys like that, and then B, we got to figure out how to stop that guy. And it always kind of happens in the NFL. You almost never see it in the other sports, and that's why I'm glued to football, and I could care less about what's going on in the other sports until the postseason comes around.
Yeah. Well, I think recently, I mean, you look at the tight end position. I mean, Jimmy Graham was that way a little bit early in his career. Gronk obviously became that guy. Now you've got the Travis Kelce's and the George Kittles, and you know that's kind of driving you towards having these cover safety linebacker hybrids. Right. And I think that that's going to be real interesting to see what the Packers do with the other first round pick, Darnell Savage. I mean, you've got a guy who, you know, he's on the smaller side, but he's extremely fast. He's going to be that kind of center field guy probably, but you know, he's big and physical enough. He can cover tight ends and play in the box a little bit. And we'll see what the Packers do with Josh Jones, because he seemed like the guy who was tailor-made for that position, right? That weak side linebacker, you know, 215 to 220 pound guy who can run, stay with the tight ends and the running backs. Seems like he's kind of, you know, off the radar at this point, but we're really excited about Savage, though. I mean, I think that's of all the picks that we have in this year's draft, he's, I think, the one that has most Packers fans amped up.
Yeah, I think that's the consensus that I saw when you guys took him. Did you trade up to 21?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we had it was the 30th pick from New Orleans that they had from that trade the year before, and then I think they moved both fourth round picks to move up to 21 and get him. But that was a case of they had their guy, they knew they wanted him, they knew they were going to have to move up to get him. I think Baltimore was going to take him at 22. I think they had the next pick, because you saw them as soon as the Packers came up and made that pick, they traded back out and Philly moved up to draft a lineman.
Right.
So, and the other connection that I have in there that makes sense to me is that Milt Hendrickson was the name of a guy who was kind of the right-hand guy in Baltimore, or at least he was one of the top-level scouts. And I think it was about February, March or so, his contract ran out, and he signed a deal to come work in Green Bay for Brian Gutekunst, because the two are old buddies going way back to their days at UW La Crosse. And I wonder if he kind of had some inkling that, yeah, the Ravens are going to like this guy. We got to get up one spot ahead of them to make sure that we get him. So that's my theory. I don't know if it holds any water, but Savage has been running with the starters since day one of spring practices, and the Packers generally don't do that. At least they didn't under Mike McCarthy. Who knows if, you know, LaFleur takes a different approach. But he's basically out there saying, you know, be our free safety. We need you to be our free safety and, you know, make plays on the football. And so far, everybody's raving about him, and I'm excited to see what he does once the pads come on.
Yeah, and you know, we're talking about the evolution of players and things like that, and you need a guy like Savage who can you know, play and come up and play the run, but is also fast enough to play the pass, because you got guys in the division like Tariq Cohen to worry about. And when we talked about the tight end position, you know, just think about how much that position has changed. Like you said, with Gronk, and you know, even 25 years ago with guys like Jay Novacek, that guy was an anomaly. He wasn't the rule. Then you got guys like Tony Gonzalez coming into the league, and that the evolution of that position. And before we started recording, I told you that I had spoken to Emery Moorhead in the offseason. This guy, when he played, was 6'1", 6'2", like 210 pounds. He couldn't be a tight end in today's NFL. Yeah. You know, the tight ends in today's NFL run like deer and are 6'7" and weigh 260. You know, that you can't be a tight end at 210 pounds in the NFL. You can barely be a running back at 210 in the NFL. These days. So, I mean, this is what he was bringing to the NFL when he was drafted in the, I believe in the late 70s, early 80s with Emery Moorhead. So, but looking at your other picks, we talked about Jenkins, the offensive lineman out of Mississippi State. He could be he's mostly going to be a depth guy right now, but he could be a starter later on, you said?
Yeah, I think that's the goal. Is Balaga's contract is up after this year, so I think the plan is probably to move Turner out to right tackle next year in 2020, and then put Jenkins in as the starter at the right guard position. He played mostly center at Mississippi State, but he's played guard for a couple of years. I think his freshman sophomore year he was a guard, and so that's basically exclusively where he's been playing so far this offseason. So yeah, he's the right guard of the future for sure.
Right, and then Jay Sternberger, or Berger, whichever that is,
Yep.
tight end out of Texas A&M, was your third-round pick. 4 picks in the top 75. That's quality drafting there. And then day 3, you got a couple of you got three defensive players, and you got another late-round running back. You guys just love picking those guys up.
Yeah. Well, and Dexter Williams, the Notre Dame guy, he's practically a carbon copy of Aaron Jones, which is, I mean, that's awesome because you don't have to change your scheme around for him at all. He's a great one-cut zone running back kind of guy. He's real explosive. He might not have the top gear of some of these other backs in the league, but he's got that explosive ability, and you know, you hit one hole and it opens up and he's gone. And that's very much what you've got with Jones as well. So he'll be a good complement to Jones and to Jamal Williams this year, I think.
All right. So overall, how do you guys feel about the draft class? I mean, has everybody softened on Rashawn Gary now that we've had some time to step back and look at things and what he actually did or what he was asked to do at Michigan? Is that still kind of looked at as a we should have drafted this person kind of thing? What were you mocking? What were you thinking of the Packers doing at 12? Because I know it wasn't Rashawn Gary.
Yeah, I think for now, I think the reaction is as everybody's pretty much come around in understanding why they picked him. I think there's still a little bit of trepidation. Again, I mentioned the shoulder issue that he had last year that's still lingering. But I think in general, you look at the class as a whole, and I think for the most part, people are pretty happy with the value they got where they did, the positions that they invested in. You know, honestly, one of the guys that I had most often in mocks and things was Montez Sweat, a pass rusher, but the guy who went to Washington late in the first round. And you know, it'll be interesting if we ever actually find out if that heart issue was what made him fall, if there were off the field concerns or what. But based on his length, his size, his
speed,
workout at the combine, I mean, it was like a 4.4 flat or something like that. I mean, I thought that was going to be a perfect pick because the Packers like athleticism so much. But Gary certainly brings that, and I think the other thing with Gary too is I think a lot of people fell into the trap of looking at him purely as a lineman, like a 4-3 lineman, rather than thinking about how he could fit in Pettine's scheme, which uses these pass rushers in so many different ways. And so the versatility that he brings, it's a perfect fit for Pettine. And you kind of think back on it now, it's like, well, yeah, of course that's the kind of guy that they would like. He and Zadarius Smith are very similar in that aspect of their game. So overall, I think they've come around. But if you were asking me who I desperately would have wanted to see fall to 12 who didn't make it, it would have been Ed Oliver from Houston.
Sure.
Because, basically Mike Daniels is another guy whose contract is up after this year. You plug Ed Oliver in as a 3-tech, especially in a 2-4-5 setup that the Packers like, where he can just pin his ears back and rush the passer, he's going to destroy people. It's not going to be fair putting him and his quickness and his strength against most NFL guards. So I would have loved to have seen him in Green Bay, but obviously going off to Buffalo at 8 or 9.
Yeah.
I think that'll be a good fit for him. But all in all, I mean, I like the class. I like where they got value where they did. And honestly, Kingsley Keke, the defensive tackle they did take in round 5 out of Texas A&M, I wouldn't be surprised if he significantly outplays a 5th round draft pick, even as a rookie. I think he'll draw some big snaps, and I think he'll be a solid NFL player in a year or two.
So looking ahead to 2019, we have some obvious storylines. The LaFluer Rogers relationship, and Rashawn Gary and his shoulder issue. Did you waste a 1st round pick? Is he going to be nursing that all year long, or is he going to be able to play? Why didn't he get it fixed, and so on and so forth? What are some of the other storylines we want to keep an eye on going into the season this year?
Yeah, I mean, this is a Bears podcast, right? So we got to
Sure.
talk about the Adrian Amos versus Haha Clinton Dix storyline,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to be one that Packers and Bears fans are going to be at each other's throats about all season long, I think. And I mean, I know which end of that equation I'd like to be on after having watched Clinton Dix play for 3.5 years,
Right.
4.5 years actually. Let's just say I was not sorry to see them trade him for a fourth-round pick at midseason last year. That was a welcome sight given how many blown assignments and missed tackles that guy had over the last couple seasons. He was great in 2016. Don't get me wrong. He was a really good player that year. I'm not sure exactly what changed for him in 2017, but he was never the same player again in Green Bay. And I think the Bears did a good job with the contract. I think you don't give him a whole lot of money, give him a 1-year deal, and see if he kind of recaptures some of that magic from a couple years ago. See if that's still there. But based on the guy I saw the last 2 years, I didn't want him anywhere near my defense again in 2019. So.
Right.
And with Savage being in there at free safety, I think Amos is the right guy. I mean, you look at him paired with Eddie Jackson. I mean, he's more of the playmaker, right? Amos was the steady guy. He was the sure tackler. He was the one who was going to always execute his assignments. And when you've got a dynamic rookie back there who's, he's a rookie. He's probably going to be prone to making mistakes every once in a while. Having kind of that steady Eddie at the other safety position, I think that can be a real beneficial thing. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how he fits into this defense.
Yeah, it should be. That is going to be an interesting back and forth this year, especially since we face each other week 1.
Yep.
So, right off the bat, we'll get to see how they look, in comparison. How does Amos look against his old team? How does Clinton Dix look against his old squad? Will the change of scenery, or the second change of scenery, I should say, for Clinton Dix, will that work out for him? And I think for him, it was more about being paired back up with Eddie Jackson like he was at Alabama. Like that had something to do with he's got this guy that, he's familiar with. He's already got that shorthand language with kind of thing, and wanting to be a part of what the Bears put together last year, which is why he took next to nothing on a 1-year prove-it deal to come to Chicago, as opposed to Amos, who's making major bank with the Packers. So contract-wise, I think the Bears won, but we'll have to wait and see on who actually won as far as the player that we got in 2019. So that will be interesting to see. What else you got for storylines?
Well, I think you've got the star turn of Kenny Clark, the Packers nose tackle. The fact that he didn't make the Pro Bowl last year, I think, was a crime, but he is, I think, the best modern nose tackle in the NFL. You don't get nose tackles that can rush the passer the way Kenny Clark does. And the kid's just 23 years old, I think. He's entering his 4th year in the NFL. I mean, he came into the NFL at 20 years old as a fully grown man, and he is only further harnessed that strength and athleticism. So look for him to be a staple in that two-down lineman formation on third downs. And I think last year was 6 sacks, 6.5 sacks, set a career high. I'm not going to say he puts up an Aaron Donald like season, but he could threaten for double digits for sure. And having that interior pressure along with the new guys on the outside at the outside linebacker position, that's going to be exciting to watch. And obviously all the new faces, right? All these free agents, seeing how they impact this team. Everything kind of, all those moves came together. It was funny because they all came within about 2 hours of each other, right? On that day right before that legal tampering day.
Yeah, the legal tampering period.
They all came down between like 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock in the morning Central Time that day. All 4 of those signings, and it's going to be really interesting to see which of those guys lives up to the deals, and just how the Packers use those guys and put them in the right position to really impact games. And then finally, I mean, Rodgers on his own. I think that's a storyline in and of itself. Is can a guy who's turning 36 in October, can he kind of recapture the magic from a couple of years ago? And obviously LaFleur plays a big part of that, but can he stay healthy? I mean, that's also a big thing. You look at the last 2 years, he's had major injuries. Broken collarbone cost him a half of the season 2 years ago, and then the was it tibial plateau fracture they called it that was the issue last year. Can he, when he's fully healthy, can he get back to that MVP caliber play? And that's what everybody's kind of hanging on pins and needles to see is can he stay healthy? Can he be that guy that we know he has been?
Yeah, and you mentioned Rodgers and his injury history. It's not really something that's synonymous with Aaron Rodgers, or at least for the majority of his career. This is a guy that took every snap of every single game until a few years ago, when, of course, people start looking at age being a factor. And even though I think you would agree that his legacy is that he's probably going to be the best quarterback in the history of the franchise, despite the love for Brett Favre in Green Bay, he's a much better quarterback than Favre was. He's not going to be copying Favre's most touchdowns and most interceptions ever in NFL history or anything like that. He's much more proficient. Hell, the interception that Eddie Jackson got off of him in our Week 15 rematch was only the second one he'd thrown all season long. And
here's a fun fact about that. Both of those picks were deflected by Jimmy Graham over the middle.
Is that right?
Both of those picks, yeah. Now, he should have had one on that last drive in that Week 1 game.
Oh, bastard. How dare you?
But, yeah, no, both picks and all two of them last year were passes thrown to Jimmy Graham over the middle that went off his hands and got picked off.
Nice. You had to. I still wake up nightmares about that, Evan. That him dropping that interception was the difference between us hosting a wild card game and having a bye week. We win that game. We're 13-3, not 12-4. We have the head-to-head over the Rams. They're the wild card team and not us. So. Yeah, but then of course
we didn't have a whole lot last year that went right for us, so I got to take it where I can find it.
Sure, I mean, hey, like I said before, welcome to my world. I completely understand. When your team goes through 6-9-1, and like we did 5-11 a couple of years ago, and you got to find the rainbows and wherever you possibly can, looking at, and the sad part is hopefully you guys never get to a point where you have to look at, moral victories as opposed to actual victories as being the highlights, and like, oh, look at the way we played against so-and-so in this game, and, all the rest of that. We gave the Bears a hell of a scare before they finally put us down, kind of thing. You never want to be in that position. You don't want to be that team. Nope. It's hard to root for that team. Trust me, I know. So, like the 3-13 team we had in 2016, there was a lot of talk like that. We should have been undefeated against the AFC South, and instead we got swept because we had them by the by the short and curlies for the majority, and then we just we got a bad call here and this, but we should have been 4-0. Man, we could have been 7-9 instead of 3-13. These were actual things I said on tape that I have somewhere on my hard drive because I was looking for the silver lining to the 3-13 season. So hopefully for your sake, you never get to that point where you have to try to find the small victories in the multiple losses that your team has to suffer. So looking ahead to the schedule here, obviously Week 1. I mean, could you think of a better way to start the 100th season of NFL football?
Nope.
I mean, honestly, even as a Bears fan, if it wasn't the 100th season of our football, we'd have to do this in Lambeau. Just then it would be absolutely 100% perfect. Right now it's close. It's like 95%, maybe 90 if I'm being completely honest, just because it's new Soldier Field, not the old school one that I keep seeing on tape and everything. That's probably the only thing missing is like the perfect setting for it. It's perfect because it's Chicago, but not so much because I've never really been a fan of the new Soldier Field. But
my one hope is that they actually have the turf in halfway decent shape for that game.
Oh, please. Yeah.
Please.
That would be great.
Yeah.
It would. So, but much like last year, you start with the Bears and then Week 2 again with the Vikings.
Yeah.
So that should be fun. Then, but that's 3 straight home games. Actually, 5 of the first 7.
Yeah. That's weird because Well, yeah, I mean it's a ridiculous stretch there, and then you've got a stretch of 4 out of 5 games on the road. And actually, now that I'm looking at 6 of the last 9 games are on the road for Green Bay. So we've got what two home games after Thanksgiving,
right?
In those 6 weeks, which it's a bummer for a team that has that cold weather advantage at home. So I mean, it is what it is. What are you going to do?
Your last 2 games indoors at Minnesota, at Detroit. So kind of neutralizes what it is Packer football is supposed to be,
right.
I guess. So, yeah, I mean, the NFL was kind of wacky with the schedule this year. I mean, there are a few teams out there, like when I talked to the Raiders earlier in this whole opponent preview process, there's a stretch where they're not home for almost 2 months.
Oh, that's right, because they have the home game
against the Bears in the UK.
In England somewhere.
Ugh. Yeah, that's their one home game in like a 5-week stretch, and their bye week as well. So it's like week 1, I think they're home. It's like week 2. I think they might be home for the first 2 games, and it's like week 3, week 4 are road games. Week 5 is the quote unquote home game in the UK. Then they're on the bye, and then they have like 2 road games after that.
Yep, at Green Bay and at Houston following the bye. Yeah.
So it's like I was looking at the schedule, and I was talking to my Raiders guy, and he's like, well, at least by the time the Packers come back home, baseball season will be over, and it will be all grass instead of some grass and some dirt field for the baseball diamond. He's like, hey, you got to find the positives where you can. So we'll have all grass out there by the time the Raiders come home. It's like, but they leave like late September. They don't come back to like the first week in November. And there are a couple of teams that are like that too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and then looking at you guys, you want to be home in December in that, you don't want to be home in September when it's still warm outside, potentially hot, depending on what year. Maybe you get a little Indian summer action going on there. But five home games before October 20th is it's kind of crazy, and definitely not how as a Packer fan you want to see your team playing most of its home games when the weather is still decent.
For sure, and what that sets up is the need to start fast.
Yeah.
Right. Is you've got some tough road games following that, because after that stretch you play at Kansas City, which that's going to be a tough game Sunday night. You play at the Chargers the next week. And then you end the season with Bears at home, Vikings on the road, Lions on the road. I mean, that's a couple of tough stretches. And so you need to think this team needs to be in a good position at that week 7 mark or so after that long home stretch, and that's a tough ask of a team with a brand new head coach, a brand new offensive scheme, to have that kind of success early on, and against teams that have given them trouble defensively in the past. I mean, obviously Chicago did with Fangio, but then we'll see. They've got a lot of that same personnel back, and I still, that's still going to be a really good defense in Chicago.
Right.
Zimmer's always given Aaron Rodgers fits for whatever reason. Anytime he's played him, whether Zimmer was coach of the Bengals or in Minnesota, and then week 3 is we see Fangio again with Denver coming to Green Bay. So that could be a real tough stretch, but it could also be an opportunity for LaFluer and company to come out and show that this offense is for real. And if that happens, then if they jump out to a 3-0, 4-0 start, that's kind of a hopefully a wake up call that this is working. And I think that's what that could be. Only that obviously would be the best thing for the Rodgers LaFluer partnership narrative, right? Is shoot that in the foot right away and get that out of there if they get off to a good start, and get people to stop worrying about that and just worrying about the results on the field.
Yeah, I mean that's always kind of the thing with new head coaches and getting off to a fast start, and you don't have the same currency that the old coach have, so the same level of patience might not be there, especially for a franchise and a fan base like the Packers that's had so much success over the last 25 years. Or so, getting off to slow starts and struggling throughout the years. You guys just aren't used to that anymore. So I mean, it's much harder to deal with.
Yeah, I will tell you that Packers fans in the last several years have been pretty impatient with McCarthy, with the defense. There's definitely a sense. There has been a growing sense the last couple of years that the Fire McCarthy bandwagon, even the Fire Capers bandwagon before that, that was getting full up pretty quickly in the season, in past years. So. And I mean, I haven't even mentioned it with the whole firing of McCarthy, but even though they lost to the god-awful Cardinals at home last season, I didn't think they were going to make the move during the season. I thought they were going to wait until after Week 17 and fire him either Sunday night or on Black Monday. I'm shocked that they made the change before the season was out, and I don't know if it actually gave them any help, down the stretch or setting up interviews or anything in advance. I don't think it really did, but it just very much surprised me that the speed at which they made that decision and how they made that happen with a couple games left.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that when we had you on for Week 15 last year. It was game 2 or 3 under Philbin, and I think it was game 2. Like, you were coming off, like, you'd beaten the Falcons the week before or something like that, and coming into Chicago, you still had a shot at the playoffs, and an outside shot, but a shot nonetheless. And and it was the Packers and the Bears. You can't write that off, even with the way that the Bears were playing. There's I was just looking at some videos of the 2001 team. That team was awesome. It was 13-3. 2 of those losses were to Green Bay. So I mean, we managed to win almost every single one of our games. We lost the defending world champions Week 1 to the Ravens. And then we couldn't figure out how to beat Brett Favre those other 2 weeks. And so, I mean, even when we've been great, we've had trouble beating Green Bay. They've always had our number, always figured out a way to beat us. So just the fact that we were playing better than you, Bear fans were supremely confident that we could win that game, but nobody would bet their life on them winning a Packer game, especially if Aaron Rodgers is actually playing. So it's enough to make you nervous, and we'll see how it goes Week 1. So it's going to be interesting. I cannot wait for that game to get here. This episode comes out on Friday the 5th, which will be 2 months to the day that we kick it off on September the 5th on Thursday night football. And we talked about it before, like why I love football and why the game is so great. It's constantly evolving, constantly changing, and we're at the 100th season of pro football, kicking off with the most storied franchises in the game and the best rivalry in sports.
I think you summed it up, man. I mean, that's I don't think there's much more I can say about it than that.
Yeah.
But you planned out that was going to be 2 months to the day too, didn't you?
You know what?
Or was it just a happy accident?
It's both, actually. It's both. It's just that we're recording this before the 4th of July holiday, and I have an episode coming out tomorrow on the 2nd. Today's the 1st, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so tomorrow's the 2nd. I got an episode coming out then, and I like to spread out these opponent previews, give them about 2 or 3 days in between, and 2 days after tomorrow is the actual 4th, so you don't want to release it on the holiday. Yeah. Release it on the day after, so happy accident, and also what a coinky-dink. 2 months from that day, Bears-Packers get down for real. So looking forward to all of it. So, because I think I even told you this when we talked Week 1 last year, was that as excited as I am, especially after the Khalil Mack trade, I think good things are going to happen in 2018. 2019 is the team I'm really looking forward to. Just something about this 2019 squad I had a special feeling about, and it's a gut feeling that hasn't gone away as we've gotten closer to this season, to the point where I'm, like shaking and anxious waiting for this season to start. I can't wait to see if it's going to be all that it's cracked up to be. Will the Bears be able to stand up to the pressure, or will they crumble as they have in the past? So, and what part will Green Bay play in that? What part will Detroit and Minnesota and all that kind of stuff? Will we be able to stay healthy like we haven't been in the past? And so many questions, and I can't wait to find out the answers.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one, and obviously we have a lot of different questions in Green Bay that we need to answer.
Sure.
The LaFluer question: can this offense get back on track? Can can the defense in year 2 under Pettin really, start to improve? If not for Aaron Rodgers' age, I think you're probably looking at the first year of a 2-year, project. But every year with Aaron Rodgers is precious, and we you can't afford to waste anything, and so here's hoping this is a playoff season, and this defense figures it out, and we'll see how it all unfolds. It'll be fun.
Well, Evan, I'm going to be extremely gracious here, and I'm going to allow you to have the wild card spot. You guys can take the wild card spot. We'll take the division like we should, and we'll hash it out in the playoffs. Maybe wouldn't that be awesome? The 100th season, Bears,
that
Packers.
Would. And just remember last time we met in the playoffs, the Packers were a wild card.
Watch it now. Watch it.
You brought it up.
You're a guest, so show some respect, damn it. But anyway. Evan, it's always fun having you on, man. And I'm almost sad that we're playing each other week 1 because we won't have that much to talk about when we have you back on. It was almost like we're going to have to do this episode again, only a shorter version of it to preview week 1, because I don't know if it's a trend that's starting in the NFL, but Nagy did it. There are a few other teams that are starting to follow that trend. Sean McVay does it. He doesn't play as starters in the preseason, so we really won't even know what our starters are capable of. I mean, granted, all the coaches kind of are playing like shielded game plans in there anyway. They're not really showing anyone anything. They're basically just doing the basic stuff, and here we are, and we're just playing the games because we have to kind of thing. Nagy almost didn't put the starters out for almost any of it last year, so I wonder if LaFluer will follow the same thing coming from the Sean McVay background, where that's what he's been doing the last couple of years in Los Angeles. He's not going to play as starters or risk anybody getting hurt. I'm liking what I'm seeing in practice, so they're good. They don't need to play. We'll wait until the season starts before I put my guys out there. What will we have to talk about when we come back and talk to each other getting ready for week 1?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, I'm hoping to have some more answers about a few of these rookies. Hopefully we'll have a few more ideas on, what the Packers receiving core is going to look like too. Sure. Seeing how those roles shape up. But it'll be interesting to. I agree. I don't think we'll see a whole lot of Rodgers and company and of this offense, and I do think they'll keep those cards pretty close to the vest throughout the preseason. But if there's one thing the Packers are always really good about, it's keeping practices open to the public, and you have to do that in Green Bay, because that training camp experience is such a special thing in Green Bay with the bicycles and all that stuff. And the kids getting rides from the players and everything. I mean, it always makes me happy when the list comes out every year of how many practices every team leaves open to the public, and the Packers are always right up at the top of that list. Yeah. So it's the community aspect is such a big part of it up there, and hopefully that'll give us some sort of insights into at least the roles they have in mind for some of these new players. So I'm looking forward to it, but week 1's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, really looking forward to it, and of course we'll be happy to have you back on to see what we can tell each other about the preseason and what little we did learn or how much we did learn. Maybe LaFleur's like, to hell with it. This is my first run. Aaron, get out there, kind of thing. Let's see how this offense works, and we'll see what happens. But look forward to having you back on. Unlike our other division opponents, we see you guys right away, as opposed to like Jeremy from Pride of Detroit. I'm talking to him. I don't get to see him again until like November. Like week 10 is our first game against Detroit. So we'll talk to you guys right off the bat, and then we'll have our long break when we meet again week 15. So, again, always love having you on the show, man. Despite the fact that you're a filthy Packer fan, and look forward to having you back, man.
It's my pleasure. Go.
No, see, I was going to ask you, where can we keep up with you in the meantime? But now I just want to kick you off my show. I just want to get you out of here. So where can we keep up with you in the meantime, Evan?
Yeah, you can always find everything we're doing over at acmepackingcompany.com. On Twitter, you can find us at Acme Packing Co. You can get me at Tex Western. I think that's pretty much the gamut. So
all right,
check us out. We'll have training camp coming up in a little over 3 weeks. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. You want to throw it out there one more time?
Yep. Go Pack Go.
Go to hell, Evan. We'll see you, man.
Take it easy.
Remember, guys, promo code ACAA for $20 off your first purchase from SeatGeek, and promo code BEARS100 for your 50% deposit bonus at MyBookie. Always love talking to Evan Western. It's just too bad he's a Packer fan. Then he and I could really get along. But, nobody's perfect, right, Bear fans? So anyway, that's all we got for the NFC North Part 2 opponent preview. We move on now to the Minnesota Vikings. And Chris Gates from the Daily Norseman will be joining us to help preview the Vikings. Where did it all go wrong? Does he think that Kirk Cousins is a guy that can't beat a good team? Does he believe that, or does he believe that it was something else that kept the Vikings, I should say, from winning any games of real significance? And what does he think about the performance they put together Week 17 against the Bears? Your season is on the line. You're at home, a place where you historically dominate the Bears. Regardless of the team they put on the field, Minnesota always wins in Minnesota against Chicago, and they didn't deserve to share the field with us in that game. We dominated them thoroughly, except for that little rush they made in the third quarter. It was a game thoroughly dominated by the Bears. So let's see how he feels about that. Also, want to remind you guys, very excited. I announced these at the end of the Lions show. Very excited about the interviews that we have coming up. Adam Rank from the NFL Network, Carolina Teague from ESPN in San Antonio. She's a Chicago girl, wants to come on and talk about the Bears. Coach Don Patterson, that's the one I'm most excited about, if I'm being honest. And, of course, Emery Moorhead will be coming back onto the show as well to help us talk about training camp and the preparation and what those players go through and what life is like when you're at training camp, cut off from your family. It's all about football for 5-6 weeks as you get ready, putting in the hardest work to get ready for this long and arduous season. Looking forward to all of those interviews. Should be a lot of fun. Should definitely help us fill that gap between the end of our opponent previews and the start of the preseason. So, and in case you guys don't remember, Coach Don Patterson, former assistant head coach to Hayden Fry at the University of Iowa, was the head coach at Western Illinois while I was there. That's where Coach Patterson and I crossed paths, worked very closely with the football program when I was in the broadcasting department at Western Illinois. And when Coach Patterson left Western Illinois, he was an assistant for a short period of time at the University of the Buffalo at the same time as a guy called Khalil Mack. So he's got an insight or two on Khalil Mack before he became Khalil Mack. And I don't remember if Coach P was still on the staff when Khalil had that bananas game against Ohio State in the shoe. So really interested to see if he was there for that and what Khalil Mack was like I said, before he became Khalil Mack. So we got those to look forward to. But before we get to those, we got our last two opponent previews. First up with the Minnesota Vikings and Chris Gates. Then we wrap it up with our beloved Chicago Bears, saving the best for last. Talk about 2018, preview the 2019 season. Lauren and I will cover it all. And God knows, when he and I get talking about the Bears, I hope you got a comfy chair and some snacks because we're going to be at it for a while. So, yeah, looking forward to that one. Looking forward to everything. I've been having a lot of fun doing the show this summer. It's thick and humid and disgusting outside, so this gives me a reason to stay indoors with my air conditioning, and I'm a huge fan of that. So that's going to do it for part 2 of our NFC North preview. Come back on Tuesday when myself and Chris Gates get together, talk about the Minnesota Vikings, and we'll move on from there. So until then, my name is Larry D, and this has been Bears Talk Underground.